Hi, folks. Welcome to the C Files. Thank you for joining us. I've got the camera turned around so that you can see it in the right angle. Um, I want to talk about this tragedy, this shooting that occurred in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is literally 11 miles up the road from here. Well, from my house, probably 13 or 14 miles up the road. And Charlotte's a pretty good sized city. But what happened today was that the U.S. Marshal Task Force was going after a wanted felon who was a felon with a firearm, obviously considered to be armed and dangerous, obviously a threat to the community. When you have a felon with a firearm, you have someone who has a propensity toward violence, and if they're packing a firearm, that means a number of things. Number one, they have a disregard for the law, and number two, they're involved in criminal activity. Okay, they're running drugs or doing something where they felt like they would need a firearm to do what they needed to do. So the U.S. Marshal Task Force served a search warrant on this individual at a residence in Charlotte. And in the process of serving that warrant, three officers were killed, one critically wounded, and I don't know an update on that officer. Unfortunately, um, I have family that is in law enforcement out here, and there's a connection to that officer as far as knowing. There's not a direct connection, but there is a connection to that officer who's fighting for his life. Um, and I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. And there was a total of 8 officers shot. So four are it looks like they're going to be okay. Four of them that were shot. One is critical in the ICU, and the other three pronounced dead, killed. Now the three, I believe, were on the U.S. Marshal's office. One member of the task force that is critical is a sergeant on with the Charlotte Police Department who is a part of that task force. So they have U.S. Marshals and they have local police that are part of that task force, and he was critically wounded. And then you have support units that come in, the uniformed units that come in to support the serving of a warrant like that. And of course, four of them were wounded with gunfire. Two shooters. The felon that they were going after was killed on the scene in the front yard, and then there was a second shooter in the house, is the way I understand it, and they're still trying to sort that one out. So tragic day, tragic day. I have a little bit of experience with this. I was in law enforcement for many years, and I've been a part of serving search warrants on houses. And I was on temporary duty with the narcotics street team in San Diego at one point, and we served warrants on houses. And typically, the plainclothes street team or the task force were the first ones in the door. Of course, we'd have our vest on, saying police on it, and all of that. And then our uniformed officers, they were on the perimeter as support units for us as we go in. So, and that, like I said, I didn't do a whole lot of that, but I did have experience with it. It's a very, very dangerous thing to do. And unfortunately, today, these officers caught a hell of bullets and gunfire, and ended up the way it did. So, um, it's tragic anytime anyone loses their life in a situation like that. I think of the New York store owners that are fighting this battle now, where they're violent felons are coming in with guns and they're robbing these guys at gunpoint, and how many store clerks and store owners are going to be shot and killed because of the leniency on when it comes to that in New York. You can name other places like Chicago, certain things in California. It's a rough time to be in the law enforcement profession. It really is. And even before I left in July of 2020. I retired, and that was, I think, 8 months after I had a major medical event that nearly took my life, put me in the hospital, and really debilitated my ability to continue being in law enforcement. And I knew it was time to bow out, so I bowed out and retired. But just a few months before I retired, La Mesa, California erupted in riots. Two bank buildings were burning. There were cars on fire. A major shopping plaza area was being looted by hundreds of looters. A massive number of people. And these people were not from La Mesa. These people were from gangs out of San Diego, out of LA. Some were bussed in. This was during a time, it was one of those times when the country was exploding and blowing up over another uh, police incident that went viral on YouTube, where someone was killed. I don't remember which one it was, but at any rate, we got deployed over to La Mesa, and I mean, it looked like a war zone. It just looked like the whole world was going nuts, right? Um, so we had to go in, and we actually had to clear the rioters and the looters out of that shopping plaza, and that was it was us, our department. I believe Escondido PD with us, and the San Diego County Sheriffs, and that was the group of officers that went in and cleared that out. Whereas La Mesa PD had to continue taking their calls, and they were still getting calls for service, so they had to keep taking their calls while this was going on. And so other agencies out in the San Diego County area went in and handled the rioting and the looting and the burning of buildings and all of that. Um, and I knew then, when that incident was occurring, that things were changing drastically in law enforcement. That was during a time when defund the police was a big movement. Cops were the devil. They were Satan. They were evil. All of them. No, there were no good cops, and all of this narrative was coming out. And of course, a lot of that was just Tavistock Institute propaganda, used for a purpose of dividing and conquering. I mean, that's all it is. And but at any rate, the profession is very dangerous right now. And with all of the leniency going on, and our southern border just leaking like a sieve, and sleeper cells and gangs, Venezuelan gangs and all that stuff, crossing our border, spies from other countries wanting to get intel off of our tech and all of that coming in. It's a hard job for law enforcement to deal with all of that. You have to remember that law enforcement is not an occupation force. They're not military. They're not an invading army that's now going to occupy that area. They are public servants doing public safety. And without the cooperation and support of the community, the people in the community, they can't really do their job. And without support of the district attorneys, without the support of the mayors, the city, the county commissioners, and so forth, and without support from the, uh, the district attorneys, the judges, if they don't have their support, then they really are hamstrung on trying to do their job. They really can't do their job very well. And so let's keep them in prayer. The National Day of Prayer is coming up on Thursday of this week. And one of the things that will be prayed for is law enforcement, and another one is government. And there's a number of categories where there's prayer going to be made. I'm going to be one of the persons, one of the speakers, they call them speakers, that will be praying at our city hall here in our municipality. And I will be praying for the government. That was my assignment. But let's keep these men and women in law enforcement in prayer, because they are going through a very, very rough time. I mean, I spent a lot of years in law enforcement. I remember Rodney King incident, and I remember our substation, Molotov cocktails being thrown into our substation and damage being done to our substation. I remember getting called in on that one. I mean, I've been through a lot of different things over the years in law enforcement, but I had never seen a time like this where law enforcement is just under the gun and have become such big targets and have been so restricted in being able to do their job. And and of course, becoming the next YouTube sensation, right? If they do everything right and according to policy and procedure and everything according to the law, if the public perceives it in the wrong way, then they get barbecued and crucified, in social media, and that's wrong. But there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, it's just the world that we're living in right now. But one of the things that can be done is that we can begin to support them, hold them accountable when they do things wrong. I mean, that's what I saw through my career. I saw officers being held accountable. I've seen a few officers being fired. I knew one officer that I worked with, wasn't working with him at the time that this happened, that went to prison on an incident. He messed up really bad and he was fired from the department, and tried and convicted and went to prison. So officers are held accountable. But the problem is that the good ones that are trying to do a good job and trying to do the right thing, they get swept up in it and they get labeled as bad, and the public takes their anger and the angst out on these good officers that are just trying to be good public safety servants to the community. So we need to, as a people, as a public, we need to discern these things better. Rather than just, it's all bad or it's all good. No, it's like anything else. It's a mixture of good and bad, okay? So we need to be aware of that. And we need to support the good and, hold the bad accountable. But the nature of the job is going to become more dangerous in 2024. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a rough year for law enforcement. I do. And so keep these women and men in prayer who put on the uniform every day, go to work, and put their lives on the line to save yours and to protect you, so that you can feel a little bit safer in your community and be protected from the criminal element. Imagine if that thin blue line was removed 100%. Imagine the riffraff that could come into your community and just target anybody they want and create all kinds of havoc, kill a bunch of people, do a bunch of evil stuff to people, steal people blind, and then walk away and there's no consequences, nothing's done because there's nobody there to go after these guys. Well, that's what law enforcement does. They go after them. And when that hell of gunfire was hitting in Charlotte today, those officers were still running toward the gunfire. And that's the difference between a citizen and a police officer, a citizen and a deputy sheriff, a citizen and a U.S. Marshal, for example, and a citizen and a sheepdog. Because the sheepdog goes after the wolf, and the wolf wants to prey on the sheep, and the sheep are the citizens. And the wolves want to eat the sheep, they want to go after the sheep, but the sheepdog stands in the way of the wolf getting to the sheep. And the sheepdog has fangs, he has teeth, he growls, and he scares the sheep. And that's what law enforcement does. They scare the community. Yeah, I mean, do you ever get a police car behind you, patrol car, and you get a little bit nervous? Well, that's the sheepdog. But those teeth are not for you. Those fangs are for the wolf. And when the wolf is coming after you, it's that sheepdog with those fangs that goes after the wolf to stop the wolf from harming you. And that's the way it's supposed to work. That's what law enforcement is all about. And when we signed up for law enforcement, I was in law enforcement for 30 years. When we sign up for law enforcement, we know what we're signing up for. We know what we're getting ourselves into. And yet, we do it anyway. And why? Well, we're half crazy and it's in our blood. That's why. You got to be half crazy to do that job. But it's a good kind of crazy, because it's the half crazy part that goes after the wolf. Crazy enough to go after the wolf and stop the wolf from harming the sheep. A good sheepdog loves the sheep and wants to protect the sheep and is ready to dig his fangs into the wolf to stop the wolf. And that's the way it's supposed to work. So on the day of prayer, on May the 2nd, Thursday, 2024, pray for law enforcement that God would give us good men and women who will do the right thing, who will punish the evil and promote the good, and that pray for their protection, pray for their families, pray for the families of these officers who were killed in Charlotte. They're going to be going through a tough time. So that's my comments on it. I just want to come on and say those things. So God bless everybody, and I'll see you next time on the C-Files. And don't forget to hit thumbs up and like and subscribe if you enjoy this channel.